Welcome to another OUinsider.com podcast. I'm RJ Young. I'm joined by OUI staff writer Colin Kennedy. Colin, what's going on, man?
Oh, lots been going on. I've been moving. So as we know, that's always a delight. But right now, I'm just excited to talk some sports.
I hate that. I had to do it last year with my place now. So I am sympathetic to you, sir. It sucks. And I had movers.
Yeah, right now I'm just living in the middle of a tornado and bouncing over different furniture. But, hey, you adjust with the time. So let's dig into what we got because I think we got some interesting stuff to talk about. And it's been a while. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, man. Well, so earlier this week you found time to write about Isaiah Coe and what he's thinking as his commitment date is, correct me if I'm wrong, June 4th?
I believe it's either June 4th or June 6th.
Okay. Because I know
around that timeline. So early June.
Yeah, so Leary was the other we were watching for, and then he announced earlier this week that he is going to delay his commitment indefinitely. I think that's in response to the dead period being extended to July 31st. Up until Wednesday, we all thought it would be done on June 30th, and that's not the case. So, I mean, in talking about the junior college kids in particular who are massive on visits, right? I think even more so than some of the kids coming out of high school. What's your sense of Isaiah Coe as a player, and how does he feel about how he's being recruited right now?
Yeah, Isaiah Coe to me is definitely a guy that Oklahoma has to be pursuing at this stage. And I know we'll get into a little bit more about why, but for me, when I look at him as a player, I think he's an incredibly athletic individual. I think he's great at shedding blocks, which is something you definitely want to emphasize in a one-gap scheme, which Alex Grinch runs. I think he's also a guy that's incredibly intuitive. He's smart. He's a well-versed individual, and he's a guy that really just goes 100% every snap. And that's all that you can really ask for, especially out of a defensive tackle position, someone who's constantly grinding in those trenches and not always getting the credit that he deserves. So I think Isaiah Coe, he's a player who obviously stands out on film, but then he's also going to stand out when you talk about Sooner Times. Interestingly enough, he was a teammate of Perion Winfrey's at Iowa Western Community College, and he's also friends with Kendall Pettis, who will be a future superstar for OU baseball. He's a Chicago, Illinois product and outfielder, and the two knew each other when they were both in the Chicago area. So you have the personal connections, you have the qualifications that make him an Oklahoma caliber football player. But then I also wonder, okay, where does he fit in the grand scheme of these things? Because as we know, we've talked about it, Oklahoma's in on a number of different defensive line prospects. So then you wonder, will the numbers fit him? Mm-hmm. I would say that if Oklahoma is the way he's leaning and you're able to take him. But I'm also under the impression that if you can take 5 or 6 defensive linemen, especially towards the interior, you do so, because I'm a firm believer that you win the battles in the trenches and that great teams have deep defensive line rotation. So as a result, if I had to give you a guess, I think that it's probably Oklahoma, Ole Miss towards the top. Missouri's definitely fighting. I believe his top 5 was Oklahoma, Missouri, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Illinois. And so as a result, I would say that Oklahoma, Ole Miss, probably Mizzou, those are the top-tier schools of that top 5, and I think Oklahoma's in great standing. So.
No, and you make a good point about interior linemen versus defensive linemen, because presently Oklahoma does not have a defensive tackle in the boat, right? The closest thing you get to that is probably Ethan Downs, and we all expect him to be a Ronnie Perkins-style strong side defensive end with Clayton Smith perhaps playing that edge position. It brings into question a thing that I brought up during the 2019 cycle, which is, not everybody gets to play end, right? Somebody's going to have to blow up into a defensive lineman, and this was true before Grinch brought in a one-gap scheme. I was thinking this, but with Marcus Hicks, I believe, is a star waiting to be born. He didn't play at all last year, but this year I expect to see him a lot more. A dude that I sincerely believe is more athletic than Jalen Redmond and more technically sound than LaRon Stokes, if that gives you any idea of what I think about his upside. But in looking at who Oklahoma can bring in on the defensive line right now, we're talking about perhaps Marcus Burris, right? Isaiah Coe, who you mentioned, and I'm forgetting one in particular.
Kelvin Gilliam.
Thank you. Two of those guys are ends. One of them, I think they're both weak side defensive ends, or is Marcus the strong side?
I believe Burris is a strong side end currently.
Okay. So they're both strong side ends. Do they project as defensive tackles, or do they project as ends, because I think that's, the thing that Oklahoma fans love to yell is, where's the defensive tackle talent, right? And in Coe, you'd be getting a third consecutive junior college defensive tackle to follow Perion Winfrey and Josh Ellison. And knowing what this team needs to be, and knowing that 295 is about as big as these kids are going to be allowed to get in Grinch's scheme, finding those guys, I think, is going to be even more difficult. But also, this conceit about where they come from, right? Like, all of a sudden, a kid that comes out of Iowa Western is somehow not as good as a kid that, to pick on your alma mater, comes out of Flower Mound Marcus.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating discussion, and I think, as you kind of mentioned, this is where Oklahoma's defensive tackle recruiting really has to take some turns. And it's a take that I've had, that no matter what you're going to do, it's not exactly what it has to be right now. So the way I kind of phrase it, Alex Grinch is recruiting to his system, and he has to find guys that are going to fit not only in the future but in the now. And as a result, when you're transitioning, you're going to have to sort of adjust to the present times. And as a result, Alex Grinch has had to take those JUCO defensive linemen. He's had to take some other JUCO players, but he can build up a reputation to eventually land those high-profile prep players that play defensive tackle or corner. So as a result, for me, I think we talk about, okay, Marcus Burris, Kelvin Gilliam, and Isaiah Coe. Isaiah Coe to me is the plug-and-play defensive tackle, but I also think Gilliam and Burris, especially because I've seen one of the two play in person, they both project as defensive linemen. I know that after seeing Burris play and Gilliam speaking to him, both would be able to make that transition to defensive tackle, which is the key thing to mention. But as a result, I think a lot of Oklahoma fans sometimes get up in arms because they see, okay, Oklahoma goes and gets the top two JUCO defensive tackles of 2019. They get the top JUCO safety, and there's a chance that he may play corner in the fall in Justin Harrington. But they get upset because, okay, it's great to land top-tier JUCO talent, but what about top-tier recruiting talent out of the high school ranks, because that's what really, quote-unquote, gets the job done. Well, as a result, Grinch is trying to do what he can to eventually get there, where he's in the arena of landing a top 10 5-star defensive lineman or corner. But the matter of fact here is he's just not there right now. And in order to get there, you have to find ways to build up what you're trying to accomplish. And in my opinion, it's better to go get guys who are experienced, who have a little bit more know-how, and maybe have a little bit better understanding of what the collegiate ranks ask of you, than it is to just bet all your horses on some guys who may not necessarily be interested and see in the end of it all that you land a 5-star guy. So as a result, I think Isaiah Coe, if they're able to take him, they take him. I think if they can go get even more JUCO talent, as we know they're in on guys like Kyrie Jackson, a corner, Dejon Warren, another cornerback. If they can get those guys, and by all means go get them, it's just Oklahoma fans are going to have to be patient right now, because right now top-tier JUCO talent means just as much as landing some very solid high school talent at this stage.